Welcome to Goblins and Aliens. In this video I'll demonstrate the sponge chop method on these Space Wolves Grey Hunters. Following up on my previous Spice Up Your Slap Chop video, it is clear to me that you guys like a bit of slap chop. I've decided to make a series of videos showing how each spiced up version looks on a full squad. It's all good showing you an individual model in each style, but to truly showcase each of the methods, it's best to see them on a full unit of models. A quick look at the tools that I'll be using. These are makeup sponges. They are inexpensive and widely available. I don't want you spending your hard-earned pocket monies on my recommendations. You can even use a dishwashing sponge, which for a bonus I'll use later. The usual painting essentials will be used: water, kitchen roll, a palette, be it wet or plastic, and a dry brush control surface. The paints will be up to you. I will use a mixture of Vallejo Express and Citadel Contrast. I will refer to them as filter paints. The undercoats will be a series of greys from dark to light. How to paint with a sponge. Start off by soaking a sponge in water and squeezing out the excess liquid. It follows the same rules as a brush. If you apply paint to a dry surface, it will cling and start to activate. This will give a dry, chalky finish with harsh textures that can affect the finish of your paint job. The nature of filter paints is to pool and build up pigment in recessed grooves and textures. Dab the sponge into the paint, then remove any excess onto a piece of card or kitchen towel. With the sponge loaded, lightly dab the model, trying not to be too heavy-handed. It is better to take a few passes at building up colour strength than ending up with a messy splodge. It is also important to allow each layer sufficient time to dry. Because of the aggressive motion of dabbing, you will run the risk of tearing the paint and ending up with a patchy finish. With filter paints, being thinner, you'll most likely absorb it back into the sponge. Starting with the darkest grey tone, aim for most of the model, avoiding the deepest grooves if you can. If you do fill them in, you can always use black shade washes to re-establish the deepest shadows. Because this is a squad, it's best to apply some batch painting rules. This is the most efficient way to keep a level of consistency across each of the models. The smoothest way to step up the brightness is to mix the deepest grey in with the next tone up. The flaw to this is repeating the same mix when you exhaust the mixture on the palette. Being regimental with your mixing will benefit you here. Write them down if you need to. I'm going for a 50-50 mix. Using dropper bottles makes this a wee bit easier. When applying the next layer, try to shrink the target area you are dabbing paint onto. Because there is no fancy object source lighting or extreme angles, I will settle on zenithal lighting, gradually building up the highlights and decreasing the area you focus the paint on. You will eventually end up with a monochromatic group of models ready for the next steps in colorization. It is a wee bit of a shame that this stage will be covered over. I do like the way they look in this grayscale. Maybe in the future I'll explore a monochromatic painting style. This is how I mask off sections using Blu-Tack. On the shoulder pads, it's as simple as wrapping around, as the surface area is wider. To mask around the aquillas and the more intricate parts, I find the easiest way to roll a few Blu-Tack snakes and shape them around the areas you will be sponging onto. Here, I'm using a texture applicator to pad it down and into the grooves, but you could use cocktail sticks or matchsticks. Try not to scratch the paintwork. It is also important not to put the Blu-Tack onto any wet paint. Give it a wee bit longer to dry just to be extra sure. Looking at the box art for guidance, the left shoulder pads are yellow. A neat trick to dealing with yellow is to undercoat it with magenta. When the yellow paint is added, the warmth of the magenta helps it stand out. For these pauldrons, I'll start with a deep purple, move up to magenta, and finish with a striking pink. The other colour variation is on the gold metallics. To help the end look, I will undercoat these with brown. Both these alternative colour variations are optional. Nice touches like this help add to the overall visual interest. Applying the sponge chop. Make sure you thoroughly rinse the sponges before starting with the filters. You don't want any of the base coats blending in with the filters and spoiling your overall work. One of the major hurdles with these paints is that they activate quicker and are unforgiving to where you apply them. With sponge chop, you must be very precise with your aim. If you need to, use some Blu-Tack as a mask to help prevent any overspill. Sponge chop can be a bit messy. At some point, you will want to use brushes for the smallest of the details. The whole point of sponge chop is to get as much colour as possible on the model before adding any little embellishments. As you can see, I am building up a few thin layers of this filter paint. By using a damp sponge to apply it, you will break the capillary action that filter paints are designed for. It doesn't flow into all the grooves as normal, it will sit on the surface as a transparent layer of paint. This allows the undercoats to show through. The same with the previous undercoat layers, it will need time to dry between each pass. If you do use a hairdryer to speed up the process, make sure to keep it on a low speed, cooler temperature, and not too close to the model. This will help avoid moving any wet paint around the model and leaving a glossy finish. Before doing any fine details, I like to double up on the sponge chop. It is a neat way of adding extra depth to the colour value. Applying filters with a sponge can sometimes give a flat finish. It is dependent on the colours you use. With this pale blue, I have lost a bit of the underpainting. Doubling up can improve or fix. For these models, it's the case of value recovery. Starting with a quick dark wash in the recessed areas. This is the first time the brush is brought out. Apply the wash and dab it off with a sponge. I suggest working on a section at a time. If you wash the whole model then come back in with a sponge, you run the risk of tearing the paint. Approaching washes like this, you will remove some of the ugly tea stains you get from being heavy-handed with a wash. When doubling up, we're not restarting the full undercoat. We're aiming for the highlights, the top two tones used in the base coat section. You could swap it up with an alternative highlight colour, but keep it in the same highlight structure. Again, give it time to dry. The other reason I like to double up at this point is that any overspill won't affect any of the other details. It's about working smarter. It also gives you a chance to assess your progress, make decisions on the overall direction. Seeing the colours on the unit might spark an idea, or you notice that you haven't followed the box art and need to paint the right pauldron black. When you hit the model again with a sponge chop, you'll see the colours pop and the shadows deepening. I will leave the yellow shoulder pad separately and concentrate on the overall armour. This saves messing around with Blu-Tack and to keep a steady flow of progress. This is also the opportunity to address another error. The magenta undercoat was too dark. This has stopped the yellow from fully taking shape. Doubling up with a brighter pink will give the colour the breathing space to pop. The bonus effect, dish sponge. The dish sponge is by far the cheapest thing you can pick up for your hobby. Tear a wee bit off to use. You could jam it into the bristle protector or a done-in pen body. Be creative. I use tweezers to hold the torn sponge. I prefer this way as it offers a variation in pattern. For this step, the least uniform the better. Starting on the weapons. Looking at the box art, they're all black. As I will follow this prompt, I do want to add a bit of flair. Using the original grey base coats, I'm going to dab a textured pattern in an ombre style from dark to light, then sponge on the black filter over the top. For this effect, you need to be extra delicate. If you press too hard, you'll smudge the pattern. Lightly dab the darkest grey down over the sword. From about 3/4 of the way, dab the next brightness. Then halfway down, step up the brightness again. If you want to add more gradients, you can go further. It is completely down to you. If you feel like your brightness has gone too far, you can always backtrack any of your previous tones. The more random and mottled, the better. With the base pattern down, go over with a filter paint. The random patterns underneath will give a nice bit of a visual variety. Fine details. The fine details are completely optional, as all the steps are. Don't forget, it's your hobby time and you should spend it the way you want. I am aware that there are extra steps to sponge chop. It's not as snappy as slap chop. This is a neat way of enjoying your time painting. Exploring different styles and techniques is always healthy. The more additional methods you can add to your mental toolbox, the better. It's the fine detail at the end that improves the overall look. For me, I take a bit more time on edge highlighting to frame the panels. I like to patrol each model for leather straps and miscellaneous items. Some of them get missed, which isn't the end of the world as they won't stand out in a full squad, but it's good practice to have a look for all these elements, just for a peace of mind. And that's the end of another video. I hope you found some value in this demonstration of sponge chop. As I stated, it's not quicker than slap chop, just a fun way of doing it. It would mean the world to me if you liked this video, subscribed to the channel, or even shared it with your friends. Until the next video, thanks for watching and take care.